The South African National Road Agency has lost over 600 million rand in revenue due to the lockdown. Less traffic on the roads and outstanding e-toll bills have led to the losses. For more on this, I'm joined by the SANRAL CEO, Skhumbuzo Macozoma. Skhumbuzo, good evening, and thank you very much for your time. What has led to these losses, or what constitutes that 640 million rand loss?
Good evening, Mr. Mdluli. Good evening to viewers of Newzroom Afrika. Well, this is just a straight result of the reduction in traffic as a result of lockdown. We saw in the first lockdown version of version 5, level 5, a drop of traffic to 25% of what traffic we had before lockdown. That hit us very hard, resulting in a loss of some 300 million in revenue as a result of vehicles not moving up and down at all. Schemes across the country. When we moved to level 4, we saw the numbers coming back a bit to 50% of the traffic that we had before lockdown, but still we had a loss of some 140 million then. When we moved then further to level 3, we saw the traffic picking up to just over 70% of what it was before lockdown, but because of the duration of level 3, we still lost some 200 million. As we speak now in level 2, the traffic has gone back to 90% of what it was before then. But because, the central message is still that for people that can work at home, they should still work at home to avoid the risk of infections and having too many people in offices and schools and so on. Private vehicles are still lagging in terms of recovery. So you still do have a degree of revenue loss even within level 2 as we speak.
Yeah. Now, SANRAL have been gripped, of course, in financial difficulty, with many motorists refusing to pay e-tolls, while others saying we are unable to pay e-tolls simply because not only we are unwilling, but we can't afford to. What is your recovery plan?
Well, of course, Thabo, you'll know that this entire matter of the e-toll scheme is now sitting in Cabinet, and we're all waiting for a decision from Cabinet on the matter. The last I had heard was that Cabinet had instructed the Department of Transport, led by the Minister of Transport, and the Department of National Treasury, led by the Minister of Finance, to further engage on the proposals that we had formulated as the task team that was set up to deal with the matter and make recommendations. Those two parties will soon be submitting their recommendation, which hopefully will be a final one, to Cabinet for final consideration to rule on the matter. But I must say that, of course, what we need to clear for South Africans to know is that SANRAL runs a dual business. We have a non-toll portion of our network, which is 87% of our network, that is funded directly by the fiscus, and we have 13% of our network, which is funded by toll revenue. Of course, for toll revenue, what we do is we go to capital markets, or we pursue commercial paper, or we find loans from development finance institutions and international funders and investors and so on. And that's the money we use to develop road infrastructure. And we then pay the money back through the revenues that are collected by toll. For the non-toll portion, we get direct allocations from Treasury, and that's what we use to build roads, and we don't charge people for using that portion of our network. Why do you toll part of the network? It is really because of the sheer amount of work that has to be done on the national road system for us to be able to ensure that it keeps running at the levels and the quality that it should, for us to continue to support the economy. The N3 corridor, for instance, moves over 80% of the freight traffic that we have moving on our roads in this country. It's really the backbone of the economy. Heavy vehicles are the ones that inflict the biggest pain on roads. So you need to maintain roads at a much higher pace and rate than you would if it was just private cars moving. So for that regime to work, you need to have capital to constantly improve the quality of the road net. Otherwise, it deteriorates very quickly. And that's really why you need private finance to supplement public funds. Now, if the decision eventually becomes that there's no role for private funds to be used in the development of roads in this country, because then the user needs to pay, it would have to be a conscious decision that we all take which would then mean that the national fiscus must support us. Now, we know that the fiscus is facing a lot of pressures and there's not enough money to go around. And I guess this is the discussion we are encouraging with South Africans so that we make conscious decisions. If that's what we want, it means that people must brace themselves for a significant increase in the tax that is charged or in the fuel levy to be able to cover the amount of money we would need to develop infrastructure if we don't use private finance.
Now, Premier of Gauteng, David Makhura, in his State of the Province address, had said that provincial government had made a strong and persuasive case to national structures that the e-tolling should not be scrapped. In fact, they're saying they don't see it as part of the future of the province in terms of their plans for development. Should that be the final decision, what options does SANRAL have?
Well, let me say that as a state-owned entity under the Department of Transport, our mandate is to develop, maintain, and improve the national road infrastructure. Traditionally, we shouldn't be bothered about the sources of the funds that will be given to us to build roads. So, if one door closes in the form of private finance, it would mean that our revenues would have to come from government. I think the big headache here is for Cabinet and government in terms of determining an appropriate infrastructure financing policy in this country, one that would be sustainable, understanding the multiple demands that are confronting the fiscus. SANRAL will live to see another day. All that would mean is that the current 150 billion rands worth of projects that were earmarked to be toll, if the e-toll scheme, for instance, is cancelled, you can rest assured that the rest of the country is going to ask some hard questions about why their parts of the world should be tolled when Gauteng roads are not tolled. And if there's any movement anywhere in this country to push for the same dispensation of the cancellation of proposed toll schemes or even the existing ones, you're sitting with a problem.
Well, the Western Cape has already taken you to court and they refuse their roads to be tolled, particularly urban roads.
True. But I must say that we've since found each other with the province of the Western Cape. We are working together. You know, since my arrival at SANRAL, the one thing we've made clear is that we are not going to push for tolling at all costs. We are not on a tolling crusade. We need to be able to look at our network, have a conversation as South Africans to identify where is it appropriate to apply private finance in developing roads. And for those roads that are candidates, undertaking public consultation and making sure that we hear every stakeholder that has a view on it. We need to make decisions about the roads where we're going to be using private finance. And for those that we are not going to be using private finance, we need to lobby government to give us adequate allocations. Because if you don't have adequate allocations, I'll make an example. We're currently now having to improve the N2 and the N3 in KwaZulu-Natal using public funds because we could not win the motivation for them to be pursued as toll roads. If we had used private finance for them, we would have been able to deliver both the N2 and N3 within a period of 4 years. Now that we're using public funds, Mr. Mdluli, we're going to be doing the same projects over a period of 10 years.
But private funds have got to also be in consideration of the economic environment that we find ourselves in now with COVID-19, and the level of growth in the economy that we are seeing is not what you envisaged, I suppose, even when you decided on the Gauteng road improvement project.
Agreed. Now, we need to live with the consequences of the investment of those roads, but we are saying that it doesn't help anybody to throw the baby with the bathwater and rubbish the scheme, because the scheme was delivered. Good infrastructure was delivered. Now the infrastructure has to be paid for. If it's not going to be paid for by the user, it has to be paid for by government. And when government pays, what it means is that a large share of the budget that should be distributed across the country for the development of not only national roads but provincial roads and municipal roads as well is going to have to be deployed into Gauteng. Now, if we can all agree that that is the right strategy to adopt, it means the rest of the provinces would have to wait for investment to go into Gauteng to ensure that we are able to deal with the obligations that we have.
But of course, Mr. Macozoma, that's always been the approach. That's the approach in terms of how roads are built in South Africa. Via taxes, everybody pays tax. It goes into one kitty, and that amount of money is used for all roads in the country. There is no sense that, well, this is the portion for Gauteng, this is a sense for the Western Cape. They collected this much, so this is how much they're going to get. It's one amount of money that comes from Treasury, and it's used for all the roads.
Yes, but what you're forgetting, Thabo, is that the profile of roads is not the same. There are economic roads, there are social roads. Even in economic roads, you've got roads that carry the biggest traffic, and you've got roads that don't carry as much traffic. The traffic in the roads of SANRAL vary from traffic that is beyond 100 vehicles per day in Gauteng to national roads in other parts, provinces, where the traffic is about 5,000 vehicles per day. Now, if you are doing your road asset management and you are then prioritizing roads for investment, naturally the roads that carry the biggest traffic will always be the ones that take the lion's share of the budget, which means some of the roads that carry low traffic but are national roads that need investment will have to lie in wait while the priority roads get all of the budget, or at least the lion's share of it. If you follow that logic, there are roads in this country that would never get the investment that they require because they purely don't meet the economic requirements to be able to attract these prioritization of budget for them to be invested in as well. So in some cases, we do have to intervene to rationalize budget allocation so that we achieve some equity across the country.
What is the ETO debt sitting at the moment? In 2016, it was about 6 billion that was reported.
No, we currently have a debt book of some 40, it's just over 40 billion, Thabo. And remember, SANRAL has a toll portfolio that we are responsible for. In that portfolio, we go to the bond market to borrow funds to be able to develop and maintain all our toll roads in the country. So it is not possible to dissect and isolate the Gauteng roads themselves. So we've got a total debt book, I think, resting at about some 47 billion. But if you do the mechanics to try and isolate Gauteng in itself, the debt that can be attributable to the e-toll scheme is just over 40 billion.